So I think good rum is like good tequila in that way. Like you can drink good tequila straight is delicious. It's just, you don't drink Cuervo that way.
No, you don't. Also,
or at all, really.
Most tequila, even good tequila, is enough to bring back memories.
Yep.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Let's Pod This. My name is Andy Moore. I'm one of your hosts, and I'm joined by Dr. Scott Melson. Hello, Scott.
What's up, man?
How are you?
I've noticed a smell in the air this week.
Is it nihilism again? Is that
It's the smell. It's the smell of being a top 10 state. That's what being top 10 smells like.
Top 10. It's kind of fruity.
It's a top 10 smell. It's fruity, but somewhat pungent.
Stings the nostrils. We're also joined in Upper Room Studios by Krystal Yoseph. Welcome back, Krystal.
Thank you. It's fun last time. Thought I'd come back.
We missed you last week.
I know.
I don't know if you listened. Did you hear us?
I did not.
We spoke to you. Didn't listen to it?
No.
Well, we spoke to you, which you didn't listen. So.
Oh, man. Okay.
Womp, womp, womp.
Sorry.
I don't think we talked about any Lifetime movies last week either.
I know.
No, we talked about something else, though.
We got off the rails.
Oh, a bunch
somewhere.
of Western movies. That's what
right.
happened.
That's right.
Oof.
Have you had a chance to watch An Officer and a Murderer?
I have not. See, I'm slacking.
Okay, that's all
I
right.
know.
Crying through his, laughing through his tears is Grant Hermes. Hello, Grant.
Hello, good to be back.
Welcome back to the podcast.
I think a top 10 state actually is a new car smell. I think it's like when you pull the pine tree fully out of the package.
Is
Right.
that's
right.
what
Not,
that is?
not the
not used
halfway
as
out.
directed.
Okay.
That's right. My first vehicle was a 1984 Pontiac Bonneville that I inherited from my grandparents, and they did not have pine trees.
As one gets a Bonneville.
Right, yeah, that's the only way they come. They're only sold to senior citizens. But my grandma would soak a cotton ball in like vanilla extract, and there was a couple of dozen of those under the seat. And
A couple of dozen.
yeah,
Was
well,
your nickname just like Doughboy? Because he just Pillsbury Doughboy. That's all I would think of every time he rolled up.
really,
Yeah.
no, that was definitely not what I was called. Driving to Bonneville with the dice in the mirror and the blue tint that I put on there.
Did you really have dice in the mirror?
Yeah,
Nice.
I did.
Nice.
Someone stole my first set. I had to buy another pair.
You didn't have a pair of like cow testicles hanging from the back?
No, they didn't sell those back then.
Oh, that's
Plus,
new.
this is Bonneville. They would drag. Chafing is like that. It's a real thing. All right. I want to start by saying happy birthday to two important people to music history in Oklahoma. One is Dr. Rock from the Sugar Free All-Stars, from whom they provide our theme music. Dr. Rock, I think his actual first name is Rob, but I've never actually heard his name. So this is not Chris Weiser, not Boom. This is the drummer.
We are infinitely grateful to both of them.
He turned
for
50 yesterday.
nice. Well done.
Also yesterday I saw that it was Garth Brooks' birthday. He turned 57. I don't know Mr. Brooks, but he is important to music in Oklahoma.
He is. It's also odd to me that I feel like he's looked exactly the same for 30 years.
Ever since Chris Gaines.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Yep. I think
Like
so.
there's been no change.
Once he cut his hair, then it's all been downhill since then. All right, let's get into the news then. Oh, son of a gun. Hang on. I turned the volume down. This is what I get. We're drinking rum today instead of whiskey, and I'm all off my game. This is delicious. All the news you can use. I should have had Grant intro the news as the actual newser in the room.
I could do that.
You
I
could.
could do the intro.
Come up with some kind of news. This is, I don't know. All right. Our first article is about former House Representative, now Oklahoma County Commissioner, Kevin Calvey.
Is that he's a county commissioner? Is that all he does?
Indeed not, Scott.
That's interesting.
He also is in the cross stitch. I heard. That's not true. Maybe it is true. I really don't know. But there's an article from NonDoc entitled "County Commissioner Kevin Calvey, also a Capitol lobbyist," which probably tells you all you need to know.
It's a pretty straightforward headline. Yeah.
It is. Yeah. Grant, are you familiar with this story?
Familiar enough. So Calvey is, while being a county commissioner, is also a registered lobbyist for a pro-life group. I can't remember which one. They're associated with the Right to Life Foundation, I'm pretty sure.
Oklahomans for life.
Oklahomans for Life. And while he was up at the Capitol for County Day, he was also sort of lobbying on the side. He says not in any real official capacity, but once you're a registered lobbyist, isn't that kind of always the case?
Right.
Whether you're
well, he said a lot of things. He was like,
Yes.
I mean, I'm not doing it. I mean, I'm definitely not.
He also
doing
said he was a citizen at one point, which isn't true if you're an elected official. At no point are you back to being a normal citizen after you've been elected to any position.
just a regular guy.
He's raising some eyebrows from both parties, including people who were pretty close to him while he was in office.
Yeah.
Right. So
In
did
the
you
legislature, I should say. He's still in office as a county commissioner.
did any of you guys see his the final? So he gave several kind of responses in interviews. Like he had a quote in the non-doc article, and some other folks had asked him about it. But did you see his actual statement that he put out on Twitter last night?
I did not.
Oh, did he put a statement?
Says, I am proud and honored to advocate for the right to life for babies in the womb. I am being attacked for my pro-life advocacy, and I wear the scorn of the pro-abortion politicians like a badge of honor. In this era, when New York has legalized killing babies up to the moment of birth and after birth, it is ever more important that we have the strongest advocacy possible for the right to life. So first, let me say that what he says about New York is completely untrue and fabricated. That's number one. Number two, is he calling all of the members of the Republican caucus that he was a part of a few months ago pro-abortion politicians? Is that what he's saying? Because he just lumped all of his critics into one basket there. And I also want to point out that no one is criticizing Commissioner Calvey at all for being pro-life or advocating for pro-life. They're criticizing him for doing it while he's an elected public official and drawing a salary for both jobs.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I think
just had to get that off my chest.
I think he may have misinterpreted where the criticism's coming from.
I don't think he misinterpreted anything. I think that statement is incredibly calculated and designed to engender a specific response.
Well, yes, I'm fairly sure that's probably accurate. But also, everyone's like, "Can you do these both at the same time?" And he's like, "It's not about abortion." And it's like, well, no. If you were lobbying for the Peanut Commission, also, that would be not okay at this time.
I mean, if Carrie Blumert was a registered lobbyist for Oklahomans for Choice and was at the Capitol doing both jobs, Calvey and everyone who supports him would lose their minds.
Is he actually a registered lobbyist for that group?
He's officially registered.
I couldn't remember
yes.
that. Right.
Yes.
Well, there's that.
And I used Carrie Blumert as an example just because she's also a county commissioner. I have no idea what
her stance on
on any of those issues. That's just was an example.
On this story, I'm waiting to hear actually from the governor's office because of his recent executive order about lobbyists in departments. I wonder if he's going to expand or maybe have a call to the legislature for an expanded idea of who can be a lobbyist and who can't be a lobbyist, or if he'll take a page from the president's book about having lobbyists and a ban on lobbying for a certain amount of years after you've been in at least the state legislature. Because it is a little interesting. There seems to be a blind spot in the state ethics code where you can hold elected office and be a registered lobbyist, even if they're at different levels of government in the state. It's interesting.
It is funny. Also, it's funny how many people are terrified of being a lobbyist or being perceived as a lobbyist. And then this is so brazen that everyone's like, oh, I don't know what I'm so afraid of now. Most state employees I know are I definitely cannot advocate or do anything that would appear to be advocating for anything. I'm like, you definitely can advocate as a private citizen, right? You can take off work and go up there or whatever. And Calvey just walks in look at me. I'm doing both right now.
He's obviously not concerned about being reelected or worried about being voted out.
I think you should only be allowed to do this if you wear a fake mustache during one of the personas, like the glasses.
At least try.
Yeah,
to differentiate in some capacity.
That's right. Hello, my name is Curtis Halvey. I'm here on behalf of
Devin Halvey.
He makes $105,000 to be a county commissioner, which is perfectly appropriate because it is a huge job that probably requires at least 40 hours a week. So, yeah.
Also, is it a representation problem? Not everybody in his, are they wards in the county? They're
districts.
Yeah.
Not everybody in his district may feel the same way he feels about abortion.
Well, not everybody feels the same way as anybody. By nature, you represent everyone regardless.
But you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So to be so brazen about that kind of
county issue. You know what I mean?
True, which is why he's allowed to do it, I'm pretty sure. Why he probably feels comfortable doing it because he's not advocating for it really at a county level. It's more of a state level.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting you think that you're saying he's not worried about being reelected. I think it may be indicative that he actually wants to be elected for a higher office and he wants to use this as a like springboard.
He'll probably run for Congress.
Yeah.
Again.
I've heard that as well.
But mark the date and time for when I get that wrong. But
No. We'll add that to the.
I assume he's running for Congress a year from right now.
Yeah, that's right.
That's my suspicion.
Check back. So while we're on the subject of Kevin Calvey, and indeed Carrie Bloomert as well, so there's another article about Kevin Calvey this week where he took a contingent of a posse, if you will, of people into the Oklahoma County Jail for a surprise visit and wanted to do a head count, right? Like wanted to see how many inmates are there right now.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. I was listening to the KOSU's weekly political update thing with Ryan Kiesel and David Hill.
Yeah.
And Kiesel, who by his own admission is on the opposite side of nearly every issue from Kevin Calvey, was like, maybe this was a stunt, which is what Carrie had said, that she called it like a stunt for drama or something. But Kiesel was like, I mean, maybe we need some stunts like this because stuff at the jail is indeed very wrong. And my impression is that no one was really upset. I mean, the sheriff kicked him out, right? The sheriff wasn't so upset that Commissioner Calvey was there. He was upset that he brought an entourage of like 20 people and just expected to be able to like walk in and walk around the jail and count people. And that was going to be certainly disruptive and possibly a danger.
Yeah. I mean, on one hand, it is disruptive to the jail, which is understaffed at the moment, and those men and women who work in the jail have a big job of keeping not just the inmates safe, but also the people who are there day in, day out. And so you've got 15 other people you didn't expect to be there all of a sudden in a jail that has had problems lately. I would understand why you, as a sheriff, you would be a little irked.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I feel like it's a problem that we don't know how many people are there, and you just need to go like count to get an answer to that question.
Well, I think he wanted to verify.
Well,
or be on TV.
I mean, yeah.
These are my thoughts.
I mean, it's almost like you think
some
he's
nods from
disingenuous.
the audience here. Yes. All right. The next article is about Scott. This is one of your favorite subjects. Just kidding. So a bill passed the House committee this week. A much touted bill. We discussed it a couple of weeks ago in our Predicto-Rama episode. Some people call this constitutional carry. Others call this permitless carry. Krystal, you're shaking your head. What do you know about this bill?
I don't know much about it except for that I am upset about it.
Yeah. How come?
Just not okay with. I mean, who was I talking to the other day about this, and they were just like, so, how are we gonna prepare like for what's? I mean, we talked about it at the last episode too that I was on. It's just like, how do you prepare to control masses of people and crowds of people if this is a thing? And the fact that it's progressing through is a little disturbing. So, just makes me nervous.
Yeah, so the bill would allow anyone ages 21 and up, excluding some felons, to carry a gun concealed or open.
Convicted felons, people who have adjudicated mental health issues.
Right.
I think those are
and
the two.
some domestic violence issues.
Yeah.
So with some exceptions. And then if you are a veteran or active duty military, you can carry concealed or unconcealed at age 18. So
is it ironic to anyone that this passed out of the House Public Safety Committee? That's just a little extra, just a little lemon juice, just a little.
So it's
little extra salt.
Widely expected to pass both chambers, and the governor said he'll sign it. It'll be out there. It's got a bajillion authors on it. We just are giving an update because it happened this week.
Do we think that Governor Stitt would have gotten through the Republican primary had he not committed to signing this bill if it passed?
I don't think any Republican would have gotten through a Republican primary had they not committed to sign this bill.
I mean, yes, but I guess I would say maybe a different way that phrase the question is. So let's say it's down to Todd Lamb, Cornett, and Stitt, right? It's those three, and Cornett and Stitt maybe don't commit to absolutely, I'll sign this no matter how it looks.
Ooh,
is Todd Lamb? Is he the governor?
I mean, that's interesting. Did Cornett give a indication about this?
I don't recall. I honestly don't know.
Not that I can remember. The Second Amendment is not really Ben Cornett's bread and butter. He's kind of avoided that.
Right.
Even though he worked for Ackerman for a
Right.
number of years.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
When we say Ackerman, we mean Ackerman and McQueen, a local ad agency who does a lot of great work, but one of their many clients is the National Rifle Association.
Largest client for
Yes.
decades. They've made
Yes.
$1 bajillion off of them.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, so that's an update. And then our last news story, this one, Scott, is in your wheelhouse.
Oh, I love that sound.
This is from Politico. Scott Pruitt. Legal fundraising started months before his exit.
The saga continues.
Well, you texted this to me and said, Pruitt is the gift that keeps on giving. And while we recognize he is not currently a member of the Oklahoma government or the federal government for that matter, I think just for historical reasons, we like to give updates on his employment status.
Indeed. Now, this is not actually an employment update, but former Attorney General Scott Pruitt started raising money for his legal defense fund at least 2 months before he resigned. There was a lady named Diane Hendricks, who was a billionaire from Wisconsin, actually donated to the Scott Pruitt Legal Expenses Trust on April 24th. It's a trust, so they made like a friggin' nonprofit for his.
Do you have a trust for your legal defense fund?
Not yet.
How many? I don't even have a trust for my children's college fund. Like
This is one of those stories that, like, when you talk about graft and grift in this presidential administration, of which there has been a lot of reporting about, a lot of it, those people who have been perpetrating that graft and grift have
The crooks.
yes have those folks
Alleged.
have said that they're not
There you
doing
go.
anything wrong, and to have this kind of, it's not a full admission, but it is obviously like he was aware that something was going to happen after he left because of what he had been doing in office, is just so strange.
Yes. Can you use your little voice that you do to say I'm going to be in trouble?
Man, I don't even know what voice you're.
You're
I'm gonna be in trouble.
yeah, that one.
voice?
Yeah,
That one.
that's the one.
Oh man.
Uh-oh.
Oh, who called the fuzz? I got dope on me.
Right? No, it's like it's insane because and you're right. Like I think what you're speaking to, Grant, is that it's this idea that like, well, we can kind of do whatever we want because there's people that are going to pay the hundreds of thousands of dollars that we're going to accrue in legal fees when this inevitably gets challenged in court. So I have like this blank check to do whatever.
Right. And it's interesting because that thought then doesn't deter people from doing those things that would incur lawsuits. They just see them as an annoying hurdle
Right.
to what they'd like to get done.
Right.
Legal schmiegel.
I think if we can learn anything, it's that if you plan to break the law, go ahead and start saving for that defense now.
Prepare,
Don't wait.
yeah.
Prepare, right?
Also, this means it's not the last time we're going to hear from Scott Pruitt, both on a statewide level or a national level.
Right.
If he's got people from other states, like the Hendricks from Wisconsin, whoever I covered while I was up there.
I was like,
for a
what? You're
while.
from Wisconsin?
I did. I went to school in Wisconsin, yes, and covered.
Do you know her?
We were close, intimate friends.
This is like
It
when
was
I
a brief
moved.
summer, much like the Garth Brooks song.
When I moved to Minnesota, and they asked me if I knew Ross Perot, and I was like, no.
He's from Texas though, right?
I was from Texas. I moved from Dallas to Minnesota,
Oh.
and my first friend, Sven
I'm like, do you-
Sundgaard, he asked me, "Do you know Ross
Sven
Perot?"
Sundgaard?
He's the weatherman up
Yes,
there now.
he is. Yes, he is.
Yeah.
I love Grant. Grant's like, oh, Sven. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna text that
He
guy.
went from like really skinny to
He's
super in shape
ripped,
now.
yeah.
Huge.
He's ripped, yeah. He's a tiny little guy. His dad was in the 1984 Olympics for Norway for ski jumping.
Huh.
I don't know
like
how.
all
I
Swedes.
mean, with a name like Sungard,
Yeah.
Right.
you can't not be.
2 U's, yeah.
Yeah.
1A.
Yeah. So all that,
That
to
was
say,
a fun digression.
the crux of the article, it speaks for itself. Mr. Pruitt raised hundreds of thousands of dollars from people, billionaires across the country. He apparently still owes hundreds of thousands of dollars to at least one local law firm. I
Saw that.
yes, the good folks at Crow and Dunlevy apparently sent him a bill for between. It's interesting to me because you don't know exactly how much it is, but the disclosure forms are it's like between $110,000 and $250,000, which like it's a lot of money. but
This
there's a,
or twice this.
right, like it's a huge difference between like 111 and 249.
Right.
Right, there's like
Right.
the monthly payment for that's going to be
Right.
significantly different.
Checks in the mail.
Yeah. All right. Well, that concludes our news roundup. Krystal, you've been awfully quiet today. Did we miss any news stories you want to talk about?
No, the one that I wanted to talk about, we tabled for next time.
Oh yes, we're gonna hold off on medical marijuana until next week. Are you gonna be able to be here next week?
I believe so.
All right. Is that Juno knocking on the door?
Juno wants to come in, but she's not invited today.
Juno the pod dog.
She woke me up and puked at 4:00 this morning, so she's in the doghouse.
Did you watch my show
Today?
at 4 a.m.?
Yes,
If you were awake.
grand stuff at the time.
Buddy, I gotta tell you, I went back to sleep.
That's funny.
I went back to bed. Sorry, man.
I would too.
Not even dog puke is enough to make Scott watch your show. All right, well, we're going to take a quick break. And we come back, we're going to discuss a Lifetime movie.
That's the cold open, by the way.
All right, we're back. That wasn't actually a break. You can hear us talk through the music.
We'll cut it.
That's right. We, as promised, because we received some feedback that people liked the digression into Lifetime movies 2 weeks ago. So, Scott and Krystal, please enlighten us about an officer and a gentleman or something, a murder of an officer.
Okay, well, it's an officer and a murderer.
That was close.
And we discussed that in detail last time.
Oh, something blue, right?
We got the Blue-Eyed Butcher.
That's right.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Now, Krystal, you've seen the Blue-Eyed
seen
Butcher,
that
right?
one.
You want to give us a recap?
I don't remember details aside from she stabbed this man like no less than 97 times, like aggressively.
None of those passive stabbings. Slow, intimate stabbing.
Eventually, you're just going back into old stab wounds at this point. It's like, please stop.
Oh, right.
Yeah. What was the story? I don't remember. I did watch another one lately that I can talk
Oh?
about, but that one I have not. I don't remember.
So the Blue-Eyed Butcher, there is a young lady and a young man, and they meet at some sort of young adult
Butcher shop.
situation, a club or a discotheque or what have you.
TGI Fridays.
Wherever the kids meet up these days, or 10 years ago when they made this movie, and so they meet up, and I cannot remember from the movie whether they like actually started dating or if it was more like kind of a one night stand situation. But all that to say, they find out that she's pregnant, and they decide that they are going to get married, even though they haven't known each other that long, or don't really know what's going to happen.
Yeah, mm-hmm.
So they get married and try to start a family, and like it looks like they would be like the perfect family, but then they have like another kid, and then like the pressures of like life start to build up, and the man is unhappy for various reasons and is pretty emotionally and physically abusive to her. And then at least what happens in the movie is this is building and building and building. The guy's got a drug problem. He's using a lot of cocaine, and there's like, it's like their anniversary or something. And he comes home and she's like made this nice dinner, and like he's like snorted up coke in the car like right before he walks
How
in.
do you remember these details? This is
How can you
amazing.
not?
I watch a lot of Lifetime.
And
It's very embarrassing.
so he comes in and like he's high on coke, and he sees this like dinner, and she's like got all this makeup on, and he calls her some like names, and she had hoped to have this like night.
Wait, hang on. Like sweetheart,
No.
sugar bushes.
Says she looks like a prostitute, but he didn't use that. Like he was really like.
So he's angry names.
Yeah. So anyway,
Mean
so
names.
Mean names.
so in the movie anyway,
Hussy.
he goes to sleep, and she just like kind of goes into this like trance, and she goes in the bedroom and uses his ties to tie him to the bed. So he's like on one arm and legs, one extremity to each bedpost.
And he's asleep.
Yeah,
This was
he's
on Lifetime?
Yeah. So then he wakes up, and he's like, "What's going on?" And she's like on top of him, and she's like, "Do you want to have some fun or something?" And he starts yelling at her, like untiming it, and then she starts like stabbing him, and she stabs him like 100 times, and he's good and dead. And so then she takes his body and buries it in the backyard, like flips over the mattress, and like paints the window. And for like 6 months, like no one knows this guy is dead. His parents are like, "Where is he?" And his work is like, "Oh, he's sick." And anyway, so like several weeks or months later, the dog is like digging in the yard where she
like the Burbs.
where she like buried the body, and they dig it up. And anyway, then the police come and they flip over the mattress. She never like got a new one. She just
Slept on the bloody mattress.
just turned it over.
Like you do.
Anyway, and so she goes to she goes to jail, for life. But she has requested parole recently, actually. It's so far been denied.
It's a true story.
Okay, I was like,
Right,
what do you mean? Was there a sequel that's coming
Yeah,
out?
no, there's like all these, all these Lifetime movies, they really happened. This is like a real thing.
The one I watched over the weekend was about it's just typical like crazy mom just makes her kid progress through these cancer symptoms that she doesn't have after a certain time, and I can't remember the name of it, but it has a really good actress in it, and I just watched it over the weekend.
This is like a Munchausen's by proxy?
Yeah, and but she ends up killing her mom and runs off with the boyfriend, and it was tragic and terrifying, but it's based on a true story.
Interesting.
A lot of them are. I actually saw Lacey Lett on a Lifetime movie the other day. I texted her and I was like,
what?
I was
She was
"Don't."
in one?
She was like just covering the news briefly.
How amazing.
And so it was taped in, she said predominantly taped in, filmed in Oklahoma. And so they just pulled a clip from her on a Lifetime movie. I texted her and I was like, do not judge me for watching Lifetime.
But I'm judging you for being in it.
Exactly. She was like, well, I'm in it. So
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Did she get royalties from that? I would assume.
Maybe.
I know that
Probably not.
well, I remember talking to Mike Morgan over at KFOR, and that he gets a tiny amount of royalties for Twister.
Okay.
Not like Gary England getting, the big money, but like he would still get checks in the mail every now and then for like 10 cents and stuff. So it's like,
Does he use it on his ties?
Does he still do the severe weather ties?
I don't know. I don't watch that
I
channel.
had to stop watching all TV meteorologists,
I only watch News 9, man.
No, you don't.
except for at 4 a.m. All right. Well, after that pick me up of I'm gonna have to get cable or something and keep up with you guys and your Lifetime movies.
There's probably you got like a Roku situation or
I'm
anything,
not
like smart
gonna
TV.
watch these movies. No, I'm still watching
I-
Parks and Rec.
I bet there's an app.
Hey.
I bet there's a Lifetime, app
Lifetime
where
movie app, I bet. Yeah.
There is a nap. That's what I'm into. Lifetime nap.
they're good for that as well.
Every time I hear these
Intermittent.
discussions, I'm just concerned about what kind of space this is taking up in your brains. Like, how much RAM is this taking from your...
Scott's got scads of space over there. He's a
That's true.
vestibule of
It's
immense
just
knowledge.
background noise. Like while I'm like cleaning,
Yeah.
maybe knocking out some emails in the morning, I'll just turn on
Background
the movie.
noise, no less than 97 stab wounds, but background noise.
It's only the last 5 minutes. Everything was good up until like he pissed her off. And
Well, to be fair,
More of the story
Victim
is.
blamer.
Also, let's be fair. I don't know about you guys, but I sleep reasonably hard, not too light. But if someone was slowly tying all of my appendages to the bed, I might
Right.
wake up at some point.
but were you drunk and coming off of cocaine?
No, you left that part of the story out.
I don't think I left that out.
I tuned out that part of the story. So, all right. Well, let's take another quick break of just music. No one say anything. And when we come back, we're going to discuss Governor Stitt's first State of the State address. That's so handy. I love this little sound pad. All right. So this past Monday, the 4th, was Governor Stitt's first State of the State address at the state capitol, joint session of the Oklahoma legislature. I was there. Grant, were you weren't there?
I was not there.
You were sleeping. I
I
texted
was
you.
sleeping.
Sorry about that.
I was.
Scott and Krystal were also unable to make it. Have you watched it or read it or anything?
I listened. Like,
You were
intermittently.
listening. That's right. We
on
were texting about it.
KOSU
Yeah.
And then Twitter.
What'd you think?
Seemed hopeful. I was impressed. I retweeted a thing or two. I was pleased.
What stood out to you the most?
Criminal justice reform.
Right.
And that was predominantly it for like 10 minutes when I was in my car driving to a thing.
Right.
That's what I caught.
A thing. Yeah.
I've since watched it several times, and I have read over the transcript several times. My initial pass, it was inauguration speech part 2.
Mm-hmm. And he had said his inauguration speech was going to be light on policy,
Yes.
so he revealed a little bit more of the policy here.
Yes. And I also thought it was a pretty stark change from Mary Fallon, who's a politician's politician, and Kevin Stitt is not.
Mm-hmm.
Decidedly so. It was a speech from a boardroom governor.
He's a markedly better speaker than Governor Fallon.
Dramatically.
I think most people would be. I think no matter who was going to win after Mary Fallon, I like Mary Fallon.
Mm-hmm.
She was always pleasant to me, but her
Yes.
strength was not public speaking.
No. Her strength is interpersonal, like one-on-one.
Absolutely.
She's very affable.
Absolutely.
So,
Yes.
But yeah, speaking, not so much. I attended the State of the State the last 2 years. So Fallon's last two there, and as Krystal said, this was markedly different, both in tone of like word choice and certainly in vocal tone as well. But I tweeted this. It felt to me a bit like almost like a pep rally in there. Like there was a genuine excitement and like electricity in the air from everybody, like both sides of the aisle. It seemed to me like there was broad agreement about most of what he said. Not all, but certainly most.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right. I watched most of it, and I've since read through it several times, and I think you're right. I think there's definitely a sense of optimism, and yeah, it's like, yes, there's broad agreement. Like he says here, Oklahomans want three things: accountability, transparency, and results. Yes, there's broad agreement with that because it's a statement with which you can't reasonably disagree, right? Like there's no one who's going to say, no, I think government should be less accountable, more opaque, and should be worse at its job, right? Like, so yes, people are going to agree with that, but the devil is in the details.
Mm-hmm.
So what that looks like, I think, remains to be seen. But I think that it was, if I was going to give it a word, I would say it's aspirational, would be the word I would use for it, which I really do like. I feel like that's a really positive thing for the state and for the leader of our government to employ.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I will note, just while we're discussing word choice, he said the phrase top 10 7 times, and he said the word turnaround 4 times, and he did only say open for business once, which Governor Fallon used to say as well. It's kind of one of those things. Apparently, we are very much open for business.
Right?
But purposely avoided in this speech because it is sort of trite,
Right.
as a phrase.
Right. Yeah.
It's interesting too. I'm glad to see, using the top 10, the turnaround language. The thing about that, it's bold, I think, to employ that kind of language because that's measurable, right? Like in 4 years, you can say, are we top 10 in this or this or this or that? You know what I mean? Like, can we see that's a metric? It's not just we want to be better. It's we want to be this much better. He says we want to turn around. Can we look and say, our healthcare outcomes going in a different direction?
Right.
Our educational outcomes going in a different direction. Like those are, I think it's impressive for him to put that out there because those are things to which the voters potentially can hold him to account if they choose to.
Right. And I think he's wisely not given a time frame. He's not like, by next year we'll be top 10, like, because you can't do that. Like for most things, like it's going to take some time to really assess where we're at, put things in place, and then enact those things over a period of years, is my sense.
So do we want to kind of go through this? Like, I think it would be awesome if we had the time to go through it line by line, like an OK Stop situation. TM, OK Stop, TM. Thanks, Pod Save America. Do we want to kind of go through like section by section?
Sure.
Like his first thing, so he's got this section where he talks about reimagining state government, and this is where he talks about executive powers, like he wants more power to hire and fire agency heads. He talks about wanting to kind of restructure some of the advisory boards. He wants to talk about he talks about performance audits for the top 12 agencies, and he also talks a lot about customer service of government, so making taxpayers, the customers of the government, have a much better experience when they interact with us. And he specifically calls for a $20 million grant program that agencies can apply to receive funds to bring their services into the 21st century and make government more customer centered and efficient. What do we think about that, just as a proposition? Not that specifically, but that whole kind of section.
I thought that was great. I think I texted you that excerpt when we were reading it because it was such a interesting paragraph. So he mentions the $20 million grant, and then the next paragraph of it, and you can read. I've got the full text on our blog on letsfixthisok.org/blog. But he says, imagine digital driver licenses that are Real ID compliant. Imagine titles available electronically. Imagine one site to obtain occupational licenses and one site to pay taxes. It's time to get it done. So certainly we've been talking about Real ID forever, I think, and we still won't get Real ID compliant licenses until next year. But the idea that and his folks, and Ostro, they were on Political State last week. I think
These are his like digital people, right?
Yeah, digital transformation and something.
Right.
They have talked about like, what if we had one portal, one app, one website, whatever, for like all of the state services, and it will take us years to get there. But the fact that we're talking about it to me is exciting. Like, yeah, I would love to imagine these things that like you can get all this stuff in one place. I have an occupational license. I have to do it on paper. Actually, I can't apply online. I have to do everything on paper. And write a check. It's like the one check I write a year.
I can do mine online, and I hate it every time.
Because it costs a lot of money.
Well, that's part of it, yes, but it's also not like
It's not easy.
no.
Not intuitive. It's onerous as a system.
It could be worse, but it could also be a lot better.
Right. Well, we can't win them all.
I think it'll be. Go ahead. Sorry, Grant.
Oh no, I was gonna say like I thought there were interesting echoes of presidential phrases in this. I mean, you get Ronald Reagan right up top. When the government does not create wealth, only the private sector can. That is almost a straight
like a
shot
quote.
from
Yeah.
from the government isn't the solution. The government is the problem.
Right. I like that he said that government doesn't create wealth, as opposed to government doesn't create jobs. I will agree that the government does not create wealth, but whenever someone says the government doesn't create jobs, has never worked for the government or realized the amount of jobs that are created by onerous bureaucracies.
Right. I thought the part after he talks about giving the governor a lot more executive power, which we can talk about too, that caught some backlash the following day from Democrats and several Republicans as well. But he says you will know exactly where the buck stops. That is Truman, 100%.
Yeah.
Totally.
Which he may come to regret later. This was a speech, like I said earlier, by a boardroom president, someone who's used to running a business and someone who's not used to dealing directly with government, and how slow and arthritic it can be as a process.
Nicely done, sir.
So we'll see if by the end of this year or the next year, by 2020, if he's kicking himself a little bit for wanting to take all of that power. Krystal, I will stop talking now. I've been talking way
please
too
do.
much.
I mean, you report on it, and so I'm probably the most novice, just bystander in this whole piece of conversation, and I have not read up about it as much as I should have in between my tweeting and my retweeting. So yeah, you guys carry on. I'll jump in when I need to.
No, but following what people are saying on social media though is that's a huge part of this, right? Like that's where social media is where I think the bulk of people, it's where a lot of us get our news, especially young people. Increasingly older people get the bulk of their hashtag quote unquote news there as well. So what were you kind of seeing like on social media when you were like listening to the speech and kind of, what were you
when you said aspirational, I think that rings true just for right now. I think a lot of people probably that think differently politically than he does. I think everybody's just kind of hopeful right now, and so that aspirational thing you said earlier, I think that if he can carry that on, whether or not he can deliver in a year, since he didn't attribute timelines like Andy said, that's TBD, and that's something that some other people will have to, I think, follow a little bit more closely. But I mean, I was excited. I think he has a low bar for a lot of people to kind of cross, and so as long as he stays above that and remains accessible, I think somewhat accessible and just seeming like he's catering to the entire state, that's going to be a big thing too, I think.
I also think that bar is malleable in a sense. I think you hear a lot of optimism, a lot of hope from not only Republicans, especially the ones who were elected in this year, who aren't a part of the platform that was ousted last year, and then from Democrats as well, because he is new, and because that bar may be a little lower. And also that they know he doesn't have a lot of political experience. And so maybe he's able to be worked and massaged in different directions, in different places, policy-wise, to become a more middle-of-the-road governor.
Yeah, I think he's struck a good chord so far and hasn't wisely. I mean, this may be, I think it's a bit him because he seems pretty genuine about stuff. Certainly he's got some smart advisors around him, but he strikes me as someone who kind of does his own thing. I mean, he funded his own campaign and it speaks for himself, and so I think he's done a good job with that. The one issue, and maybe this is an example of that, honestly, but the subject of Medicaid, of course, came up in the speech, and I felt like this week, or the last 2 weeks, he's made 3 or 4 comments about it, and it's like a back and forth. I don't know if it's like full on flip flopping. Three comments.
3 times. It's what I like to call a flip flop flap. At that point,
Nice.
So
I love having a journalist here.
he says the thing in the campaign, right, that we shouldn't expand Medicaid. He doesn't want to increase costs in Oklahoma.
Right.
Yeah. And then he then says he's open to expanding Medicaid.
Right.
And then he goes back and says he's no longer that open to the idea of expanding Medicaid again. And it's a flap at that end because now you've opened the door and closed it twice.
Right. But then like just yesterday, I think he was talking to the Associated Press, and it sounded like he kind of opened it a bit again.
Yeah, he peeked through the eye hole.
Right.
Peephole. Yeah.
Right. So I think, supporters of Medicaid expansion will say it was open once and we can open it again. And of course, the other side is like, no way, stop talking, Kevin. To me, the interesting point, and I feel like we may have discussed this previously on the show, but what he says in his speech is that like, listen, and maybe he said this broadly, like, we want to bring in all the federal dollars we can, right? We're paying the money, yada, yada, yada. But we don't want to take money and make us reliant on these federal dollars because the feds could then yank them away. Except that's never happened in 50 years of Medicaid. Right. That's never happened. And we don't apply that same reason to transportation funding or education funding or literally anything else funding. Like, that we get lots of federal dollars, and it seems, and maybe because it's a big chunk and it's new, also it's polarizing, but it's just funny to be like, we'll take all other money, no big deal, but this we're nervous about. And I get that healthcare is somewhat tenuous, like in its status with the federal government. No, I mean, they're not voting to repeal transportation funding 100-something times. Like,
So he says, while Medicaid expansion currently stops at a 90% federal match, we cannot assume it will remain this high forever. So first of all, it's not a federal match. It is the state pays 10% and the feds pay 90%. Right. So it's not the state pays $100 million and the feds give you $90 million. It's the state pays $100 million and the feds give you $900 million. Right. So that's the first thing. It's not a match. Then he says the estimated $150 million price tag for Oklahoma to expand Medicaid could leave us down the road fronting more than $1 billion when the federal government pulls back on its commitment. They've done it before and they will do it again. That's not true. Now, what I think Governor Stitt and his staff and the people who help him compose the speech would say, they're specifically talking about the graduate medical training program, graduate medical education. So this is money that comes from the federal government to train doctors, so residents who have graduated medical school but are in the process of training in their chosen specialty. A huge amount of money comes to Oklahoma from the federal government to support that training. It is true that in the last 2 years, the federal government has clawed back tens of millions of dollars from the state that we were given to support graduate medical education. However, they didn't just say, oh, hey, policy change, sorry, you have to give us the money back, you're responsible for all this cost now. They specifically allege that the state of Oklahoma used that money improperly and did not live up to its end of the bargain to receive those funds, and because of that, we don't get that money anymore. So it is not accurate to say that, like, with that program or any other, the feds have said, oh, yeah, sorry, we know you did this, but we're changing the rules. They say, you didn't follow the rules, so you no longer get the money.
And healthcare, specifically Medicaid, is a partisanly fraught issue because of the ACA or Obamacare, and because of the way that it happened during the Clinton administration. And so this back and forth has been turned into a party fight at the federal level. And when you have people like Matt Pinnell, who is deeply involved in federal Republican politics, mm-hmm. you bring those things into a governor's office or an administration, and those things, the news is national to a large extent, and so people understand them in a national context before they understand them in a state context. And I could understand why you would want to draw that line right away to, in a speech that is very bipartisan and very aspirational, also remind your voters that you are still for them.
And he does that. He did that at the very beginning, right? He made a statement
right
at the beginning
away.
Where he said, hey, I'm here, I'm the governor of the whole state, I represent everyone. However, there are issues on which we're going to disagree, policies on which we're going to disagree. We were all elected with different constituencies and on different specific issues. So just because I'm being like chummy today doesn't mean that, like working together doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get your way, because he justifiably says, I was elected with a mandate, and so this is how I want to govern. So that's healthcare, and then government reform. The only other thing I think I would say about the government reform piece that he talks about at the beginning, when you talk about going like a one-stop shop for government services, whether it's, applications or license renewals or what have you, I'm really interested to see how they go about that. To me, it's an potential interesting test case of running it like a government or running it like a business. So I think what would often happen when you have this kind of proposal in a government bureaucratic kind of, environment, you might have a committee and like maybe there's a study group and it's like, how could we do this? And people have some ideas and we'll meet again in a month and we'll kind of talk about it. And then like 5 years later down the road, we've got a plan. And then 5 years after that, like we'll have an app that's, the technology is outdated by like 10 years. I could be wrong, but I think that in the private sector, if you own, say, Gateway Mortgage and you want to like have a one-stop shop where people can like apply for a mortgage or refinancing their existing loan or whatever, you wouldn't necessarily try to reinvent the wheel. You might say, what does that other bank do? Somebody get on their website and see how it looks and see what it works. What are other people doing like to generate ideas rather than starting from scratch? And I bring that up because there are governments in the US, but also all over the world who already do this, right? Like there are several European countries where what he is laying out is exactly how government works. And to me, it would be instructive to like maybe look at those examples and see, how do they do it?
And he's done a bit of that already with hiring John Budd as the COO of the state, as well as nominating him to be the Secretary of Agency Accountability. And those positions are related. They're apparently different. I'm not quite sure how yet. They are ambiguous. But I ended up talking to the COO of Tennessee a few weeks ago about how he does his job. And it is that thing. It is reducing the amount of time that you have the back and forth, the bureaucracy that's often decried, particularly by the right. And so that's what that position is supposed to eliminate, is this thing that we don't have an app 5 years down the road that doesn't work because it's running on iOS 12 and we're on iOS 48.
Right. I tweeted about, there was a story on Governing, which is like I don't even know how to describe it.
It's a great magazine.
It's a great magazine.
Online magazine.
Yeah, about like government and often
specifically like state and local government. I think.
Right, and about like good examples of how it could run or should run. Last year or year before last, about the COO position and how states are moving to that, and I was like, oh, this makes total sense. And it was really about to dig in and to coordinate and make sure that agencies are talking to one another, because to help them not be quite so siloed. I thought was really helpful. So I'm excited that he formed this position.
All right, so that's government reform. We've hit healthcare. Education took up a big chunk in the middle of the speech. He talked about his commitment and his administration's commitment to public ed. He talks about moving the needle on outcomes. We will set high standards. We will enact reforms. We will invest in the classroom. But first, we must continue our investment in the teacher. And he talks about relationship between students and teachers, and that being really where you do that moving of the needle. He proposes a $1,200 pay raise per teacher. He also wants
sorry to jump in, but a $1,200 pay raise, but no additional classroom funding.
Yes. So that's the thing. So $1,200 increase per teacher, a $5 million bonus recruitment program, getting rid of standardized certification tests, etc., stabilize the funding of public education. He talks about reviewing and revising the funding formula, as well as maybe giving individual school districts the power to use. He didn't come out and say giving individual districts the power to use like ad valorem taxes and property taxes, but that's what he means, which is interesting since that just got voted down as a state question in November. But what is notably absent from his section on education is no increased classroom funding. And my takeaway from that was, did you not listen to anything that the teachers have been saying for the last 9 months? But what did you guys think?
It's notably at odds and it's a far less monetary investment than what both State Superintendent Troy Hoffmeister asked for and what OEA is asking for, and they've already set a date for another possible walkout.
Right.
They straight up said that's still on the table. They likely will not. That's probably not going to be a great political look for them.
No.
But it depends on how things get this year.
Yeah, and
That's April 2nd, by the way, is their day of
Good to
protest,
know.
day of advocacy.
good
That's
to
what
know.
they're calling it.
And yeah, and that's a smart way to frame it, right? Dave advocacy. OEA is. I feel like they miss as often as they hit with some of their political efforts. I mean, I know some of the folks over there, and I think they're good people, and I get some of this is difficult, but they've got to be aware. They're in a bad spot. This is the truth, because they've got to at least threaten it, but also like calling their bluff seems like an easy thing to do. We're like, because they have stand to lose a lot if it's done wrong, and they did get a lot last year. They definitely still need classroom funding, and teachers said last year, like, I'd like a raise for sure, but also don't forget the classroom funding, because you may give me a raise, but I'm still spending a huge chunk of my money on supplies for my classroom and trying to meet the needs of my students, and so you've really got to do both.
I mean, this was one of his campaign promises. Was that to shift the funding at the state level to the local district level, and he got some pushback for that during the campaign, particularly from Edmondson, but also among education-minded Republicans and newly or soon to be sworn in members. So,
but I mean, do you think that's because he lives in a urban area? Like I think about this a lot. That for all of us who live in an urban area, I drive past countless schools, and I think about schools the way that I grew up. I grew up in a suburban place, and in Texas, and the schools there and what that looks like. And whether it's urban or suburban, it is markedly different than rural areas. And there are hundreds of districts in rural Oklahoma who do not have ad valorem taxes to spend on school stuff, right? It's not Broken Arrow. It's not Edmond. Many of them you could change the law and it wouldn't improve their education funding $1.
they don't think about it that way. So if you talk to those folks, you talk to those superintendents in those rural areas, they actually see it as a way to uncouple from 23rd and Lincoln, in a sense, so that they have local control that is not affected by the big city folk who don't understand their lives. While they may not have ad valorem taxes, in their thinking about this, whether that's actually right on an Excel spreadsheet or not, is neither here nor there, because how they see that is their school district, their town, their kids, their teachers, and they'd like control outside of the governor's office and outside of the Capitol.
So even though they may not get any more money, it gives them more control.
Yes.
And they would appreciate that.
Yes.
That makes sense. I mean, from their perspective, I get it.
Yeah, it's interesting. You talk about the pay raise, and I don't have the number in front of me. Do you guys know how much the $1,200 raise, like what that costs by itself?
I thought it was $125 million. Don't. But someone double check me on that.
Now that you say that, I feel like I've seen that number. It's interesting
I should
to
know.
me.
I reported on this. I said it on television at some point.
I put it at 4 a.m, though.
It was 5 a.m, but yes.
It would be interesting to know if you polled Oklahoma teachers, would you rather a $1,200 raise or would you rather $125 million in classroom funding? Like, which would you prefer? We had somebody, we were tweeting this week, or I think was it Gary? I think it was Gary Kaplinger. If you don't follow Gary on Twitter, follow Gary. And he tweeted out, said, okay, teachers, Oklahoma teachers, what's everybody going to do with their $20.43 a week that the governor wants to give you? And Andy and I, we were tweeting with or texting with somebody else about that, and the person we were said, hey, that's half a tank of gas, right? Like that's not like a full tank of gas or a 2 full tanks of gas a month. Like that's not nothing, But I think it'd be really interesting to see what teachers would prefer, because the teachers I talk to, I think by and large, would prefer that injection of funding into the classroom. The other thing, I think that there's been part of the reason there's been so much pushback on this kind of local control or enhanced local control, whatever you want to call it. There are a lot of folks who know way more about education funding than I do, notably Dr. Deborah Geist Gist in Tulsa would say that one of the things Oklahoma does well, we have one of the best funding formulas in the country.
I would like to see a chart. Like I want to see the funding formula in some kind of flow chart.
So you can look it up.
too.
You can get a doctorate in the funding formula, which tells me it's complicated.
So I last year during the walkout, I looked it up to try and understand this, and it is and the goal was to talk about it on the show, and the reason we didn't is because I went through it, and it is literally like, I think it might be hundreds of pages long, but it's at least it is incredibly complicated. It uses a unit of measure called mils. It doesn't even it's a very
What?
It is, and I don't know. I would if we could get, you know what, it might be great if Dr. Gist would come on and explain all this to us.
Yeah,
that would be
Sean Heim or somebody.
Yeah, Dr. Gist, if you're listening, just come on in, explain this to us, but speak slowly in the way that men can understand.
Right.
And
We
leave
have-
a manual.
That's right.
Cliff's Notes manual.
We have some mutual friends with her.
It is, but it's she and I were we weren't on the same panel, but we were both panelists, and so it would be, I think it'd be really interesting because that's some of these people who have been known as education reformers. I mean, that's how she made her. There's a great Politico feature on her actually, and she made her name as an education reformer. But she says one of the things Oklahoma does really, really well is our funding formula, and so I think there's a lot of reluctance to muck with that. Muck with M.
Muck it.
Can we skip ahead to criminal justice reform?
That's next.
Yeah, let's hit that,
Perfect,
and
perfect.
then we'll wrap it up here for today. Who wants to jump onto that? Krystal, jump onto that. That's a cause that you care about.
I do care about it, and it's kind of one of those things. Just as an outsider, it's so we've seen so many things. I think over the past, in more recent history, especially now, it's kind of like a hot topic. It's one of those sexy words that gets everybody riled up, and so
Like moist. Or not. Fair.
It's just
Not.
a bad word directly in the headphones. That's all.
yeah, and it was
all.
kind of loud, and so, but I retweeted something from the speech. Then I saw a tweet and I retweeted it. I haven't done much research on any of this stuff yet, but all that to say, it seemed progressive as far as what I saw on Twitter. And I'm sorry, that's all I know.
I mean, it is fairly progressive as far as criminal justice reform has in relation to where Oklahoma has been. I mean, as recently as 3 years ago. It's also one of those bipartisan issues that has to come from the right.
Right.
Especially in a state like Oklahoma, but kind of all over across the board and all over the country. This issue has to get taken care of from the right, from the folks who have made their money and their political bones on tough on crime, law and order.
Yeah.
This is just one of those issues that has to come from that direction. I also think it's interesting that it's become a cornerstone or a real pillar for Governor Stitt, who had some serious foibles during the campaign about criminal justice reform, specifically incarceration rates, specifically the number of people incarcerated, where Oklahoma ranked in that. I think as they progressed through the campaign and after he was elected, this became a serious issue for them, not only because of his discussions with Governor Fallon, or former Governor Fallon now, and the work that she did on criminal justice reform, but also I think he got a better sense of just how big of a deal this is in Oklahoma.
Yeah, well, and during the campaign, when he learned about how DAs are funded and the fines and fees, and he was pretty open up. When he found that out, he was like, "Well, wait, that doesn't make sense.
That ain't right." Yeah,
Right, yeah.
There was a lot of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So just so everybody knows, in case they haven't read or listened to the speech, when we talk about criminal justice reform, he says, he points out that we're number one in the nation for incarceration. We're actually number one in the world. No. So he had a guest there, a woman who works for him, who's been an employee at Gateway for 13 years.
Melinda, right?
Melinda, yes. But she
you
had
know her,
been a drug offender, and that's what that she had that label anytime she applied for a job or tried to get a loan. So he proposes specifically $1.5 million to Women in Recovery, which is a public-private partnership for women with criminal history. $10 million to the County Community Safety Investment Fund, which is something that we created 2 years ago with State Question 781. He also wants to accomplish licensing reform for people with felony convictions, as well as reforming our correction facilities to make them cleaner, safer, and operate better, as well as, I think, providing potentially better pay and benefits for the folks who work in correction facilities. So that's what he's like. That's what criminal justice reform looks like to the governor. What is interesting that I don't think he mentioned in the speech, even though he has talked a lot about it, is the need to change how, like you guys are talking about, DAs and courts are funded, moving them to appropriated agencies rather than funded off fines and fees.
Yeah.
So that was criminal justice reform.
I will say one thing.
Yes, ma'am.
I did like, he really humanized Melinda. I was listening, I heard that in the car, and just the opener for that, just the way he opened, just take a moment to reimagine, like that's again, like very progressive. I enjoyed hearing that. But then the way he talked about her, and I'm sure, I know it's like writers and everything, but you could kind of see her without seeing her through like the radio. I felt like really moved by that.
That's really good feedback. I mean, I was there, and so I could see her, but for you to say that you could theoretically, or see
and it was
her
funny because I
also.
didn't see a race. Like I didn't know what her race was. I didn't know what her age was. I had no idea. But just the way he opened that up, it's like you could imagine it being anybody you see on the street or somebody you've encountered if you volunteered. So
yeah, I will say that during the speech there was 2 or 3 people that he highlighted like that, where he told their story, which is a common tactic, and they do that in the State of the Union and everything else too. Also, to me, it was a good reminder for everyone who's listening. This is why it's important for you to get to know your legislators in a personal way, and for them to know you, because your story might be the story that makes an impact like that, right? So you could be Melinda about whatever it is that is important to you. Another good example, this is Erin Taylor. For people who know her, she has a son on the disability waiting list, and he's been on the waiting list for, I think, a decade or more, 11 years or something. And she is at the Capitol all the time. She's just a mom and has become like the chief advocate for that. And I've heard her name mentioned many, many times in terms of the disability waiting list. She's often there, but sometimes she's not. And she has done an excellent job as an advocate for her son about, like, this is something that's super important to my family, and has become the go-to person for that, for not just her legislators, but like all the legislators that are up there. And I think it's a good reminder for all of us that like even me, I mean, Julia Kurt is my new senator. She lives down the street from me. I've known her for a couple of years, and I went to see her the other day on Monday at her office and just say hello and happy first day of session. But also, can we schedule a time to actually talk about things that I care about? I know that we might agree on things, but I want you to know things we've never talked about, like HIV stuff. Like, we've got a bill about that, and some of the issues that Let's Fix This cares about, election reform and stuff. I want a chance to visit with her so that she can hear why those are important to me and my story, in hopes that could help move the needle somehow.
I will say, in the people that he had out in the audience that he pointed to and made a point of talking about in his speech, I've only met Governor Stitt on several occasions, and one of them was when he came on our show and talked with Lacey Lowry and Robin Marsh, but I was in studio for that. He has sort of an unpracticed genuity that you don't see in a lot of politicians, because he isn't a practiced politician. So when he talks about these people, it comes across genuine, because I actually think it is.
Unpracticed genuity.
That's good.
That's some professional writing right there.
That's almost, what was the word you tweeted about last night?
Subterfuge.
Subterfuge.
You guys ever
Very
use
nice.
subterfuge?
I have.
Subterfuge is a great word.
I tweeted back at you something today that I really liked.
I saw that.
What was that?
Subterfuge, the centrifuge.
Well, that, but then today I used another word. It'll come back to me. Using that big education.
The last area, and this is we're short on time, so we'll keep this really brief, but I think it's worth mentioning. So the last section that he talks about is the overall budget, and how that budget with revenue growth and how that relates to our rainy day fund and what the state savings account really needs to look like. And the short version is, we've heard from various kind of agencies and predictors that the official number right now is that there's $612 million of excess revenue. Many people think that's going to come down by 250 million or so. But right now, that's 612 million is the official projection. He says, my budget addresses 230 million in obligations, another 150 million in critical needs. So that's new spending on things like healthcare and education. But he also wants us to raise the rainy day fund from its current cap of 874 million to $2 billion. And to kind of put a down payment on that, he wants to take 250 million of that 612 and put it in our savings account. What that means is that the vast majority of state agencies are going to see flat budgets for this year without a funding increase. And I don't know that that is something that a lot of people expected with 612 million in revenue growth, and B, I have not really seen much on social media in the way of positive or negative feedback on that. I don't know how realistic a goal that is. I mean, what do you guys think?
We'll see.
I just think it'd be interesting to see if the legislature actually is like, sure, we'll do that, or like, nah, thanks, bro.
No, I think right now everyone's waiting for the final budget projections from the whatever.
OBS.
Yeah. Also, just this morning I was listening to Marketplace on NPR, and they were talking about OPEC and the NOPEC law at the federal level, and there's a chance that nothing to do with Oklahoma, right? Like Congress could vote on this NOPEC thing, and OPEC could file back and like raise prices or cut production or something, and that would in some way help Oklahoma oil companies, and we might see this boon of oil money come in that we don't expect because of something that happens thousands of miles away. I don't know.
Or OPEC could increase production, and
they could run prices down. Yeah,
live with $30 oil, and
we're screwed.
They don't love $30 oil, but they can tolerate it a lot better than we can.
Yeah.
Says the doctor who does not work in the oil industry.
I mean, when I was out working in the field.
Yeah.
So.
All right.
Hold on, wait. I have things. Sorry, I was waiting for my Twitter to load because there was an interesting set of graphs from.
I have things. Is that what you said?
Yeah,
I love
things.
graphs.
I have things. I
love
graphs. I love lamp. There's an interesting set of graphs from the Washington Post this week where they showed where states get their electricity from.
Oh yeah.
And Oklahoma's is this like Richter scale-esque version of how we produce electricity.
I know the one you're talking about. It's great.
Yeah, it's just this.
Will
it is just.
If you'll send, whoa, mercy, that's not what I
Right.
expected. If you will send that to me, I will add it to the blog post for this episode.
I will. And so it's apparent that Governor Stitt recognizes that we have this crazy boom bust cycle, especially with natural gas. It has turned into a much more volatile way of producing energy and revenue than oil ever was. So you have that working. We also voted to not create a boom bust cycle,
A stabilization fund, yeah.
Yes, it was called the Vision Fund this last election, which we voted against. I think it's because people got confused between the Vision Fund, which is what Fallon had called it, and with the eye doc,
the optometry bill.
right, because they both had
probably,
vision in them.
That's probably true.
But Stitt saying this, does he undermine the direct vote of the people?
Yeah.
Because how do you walk into as someone in the legislature or as a governor? How do you walk in to say, well, they didn't really know what they were voting for, and what kind of precedent does that set?
Ask the state house in Utah. They know the answer to that.
Ask our state house about 780 and 781.
Right. Well, the other thing is that law was a constitutional amendment, right?
Right.
And I think I keep saying this, like Oklahomans are starting to wise up that we don't need to amend our constitution every time we turn around, right? It's 600 GD pages long. Like I'm cool with having a constitutional convention to like
Longest governing document in the world, baby.
not anymore.
Oh, that's true.
But it was at the time. But I think we should let's revisit this and maybe prune it down and make it something that is more of a living document that doesn't have to be changed because they misspelled a word or think science evolved, that kind of stuff. And I think, don't we? So we have the rainy day fund, which he wants to expand, and then do we have another fund? And then the Vision Fund was the third one, wasn't there?
The Vision Fund would have been the second
one.
fund.
Yeah.
Technically, we have a second fund, but it is pulled from so often just by the way that the executive branch in this state works. It is essentially not there.
Oh, gotcha. So, I mean, I think we all know, like, we've got to do something that does provide more stability. It's easy to talk about diversifying the economy so that we have more resources, but we haven't done that yet.
Well, and I'm not advocating. I'm just stating facts. Yeah, I already closed my deal, so I don't have the exact numbers. But he talks about North Dakota and that they have like this huge. He said like they have like $3 billion in their savings, and Texas
I have that right here.
Texas, a cost of $3.7 billion.
No, he says
right?
North Dakota has more than $5.8 billion, and Texas has $12.5 billion
in their rainy day funds.
Yeah.
And he's like, we should be aspiring to that. To which I would say, yes, you are correct. But do you know what else North Dakota and Texas have in common? Much, much, much higher taxes on oil and gas production than Oklahoma.
And this proposal to create this kind of fund is unpopular with oil companies. Stitt isn't linked directly or as closely as previous governors have been to oil and gas in this state, so it'll be interesting to see how his relationship changes, or if there's a level of animosity that develops between the governor's office and the prodigal sons of Oklahoma.
That would be interesting.
But
can they be prodigal if they haven't come back yet?
They've never left.
Well,
I don't know if that works. I'm not up on my parables, but I'm pretty sure you have to leave.
Are they the oldest son that pouted when the prodigal came back?
Teach a man to fish, and there's no I in team.
So we'll see what happens with this idea about this fund. If he can make it work and get support from the people who would likely pay in the most,
sure,
this might be a thing. It makes sense when you just ask people on the street.
Sure.
But again, we didn't vote for it. So.
Well, I mean, I'll just say, I voted against the Vision Fund, not because I don't think we need one, not because I don't think we should have more in savings, but because I don't think we should be, when our agencies have been cut by 40% and we've been cutting classroom funding and per pupil funding in education for 25%, I don't think that's the time to start putting money in our savings account, unless we are going to, right? It's like if you make, you know, I don't know, if you make $25,000 a year, like, and you're trying to like get a hold of your finances, I don't know that that's the way to do it, but unless you're going to get a raise. Now, if you get a raise where you go from making 25 to making 50 or 75 or whatever the number is, that's when it really makes a lot more sense. But if you are 6 months behind on your car payment, you can't start putting money in savings. Right?
This is my problem, is that we run this state the way that most Oklahomans run their personal finances, and that we desperately need to save money and pay our bills, but most of us can't afford to do that. That's why most Americans can't survive an unexpected $500 expense, right? Like, it's the same thing on the state level, and that's not okay. And we've got to find a way to make hard decisions and do that.
There's I forget who it is, which national like think tank or NPO it is, but there's a definition that there's like the poverty level, but then like functional poverty is not being able to access $2,000, like not being able to withstand a $2,000 emergency without accessing credit. And that is
almost nobody. Like 80% of Americans can't come up with like $400 in
no
cash.
it's something like that. It is astonishingly high. And then when you drop it and say to even, do you have even enough credit available to withstand a $500 expense? In Oklahoma, only about half.
Right. Yeah.
So can we, as we wrap up, can we say, we usually drink whiskey here on the show. We're drinking rum today. Can we say
who it's from?
It's
local.
You want to tell us about this, Krystal?
Yeah. So Obahoshi is a new inland style rum from Prairie Wolf. The bottle is not, if you look at the label, it does not look like the Prairie Wolf label that you're used to, and actually the one you're probably used to changed in May. So there is a second label you should be on the lookout for now. It's the Obahoshi. It's beautiful. Yeah, it's got a really artistic vibe to it. A local design house here in Oklahoma City, Cooper House, designed it for us. I do the PR for Obahoshi.
Nice. Shout out to Aaron and Tim Cooper.
Exactly.
Is that a rabbit on the label? Is that what that is?
Yeah, so there's a wolf and a rabbit. The wolf, Obahoshi means
it's a
wolf.
dingo.
And it's not.
Wrong indigenous culture, mate.
So quietly, it's not.
It's not.
Wrong indigenous culture.
Obahoshi means wolf in the Seminole language. And so the Prairie Wolf guys source all of their sorghum from the Seminole Nation. And so they have a great partnership with them.
Sorghum is in the wheat family, right?
I thought it
think
was
it's
the
a
sugar
sugar
cane
family.
family.
I don't know. I'm just throwing it out. You guys were slow to correct me, so
Yeah, sugar cane. It's a-
We wanted to agree, and I don't think that's true.
right.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But yeah, so it's out and about now. It's been on the shelf since October.
Just a
And
bunch of city slickers, the four of us.
That's right.
It is. It is.
it's the
Our
more
food
premium
podcast.
product from Prairie Wolf.
Next
Well,
week, let's
enjoy.
discuss recipes.
I mean, it's delicious. It's got it's not too dark. It's got a nice color to it. It's got a nice finish. Sweet, but not overpoweringly so. Really excellent. So if you have not checked out the oboshi, check it out.
It's not your daddy's rum. Whatever your dad.
Did your dad drink rum?
No. I've seen my dad drink twice in my entire life. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of the show.
My grandpa drank 4 roses.
Really? Well, we had that a while back. I just finished that.
Are all four of us going to be back next week? Is that
I think so.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's do
Sounds
it.
good.
all right?
Yeah.
Scott,
Beautiful.
thanks for being here. Thanks for letting us
Man.
be in your house.
The smell of top 10 is in the air.
Indeed. Grant, thank you.
Thank you.
Krystal,
Thank you, sir.
thanks for being here. Don't forget to subscribe and rate Let's Pod This on Apple Podcasts because, well, that helps other folks discover us and become better informed. Remember, you can connect with us on Twitter and Instagram at Let's Fix This OK. Scott is at SC Melson. I'm at Andy OKC Grant.
I am at Grant Hermes KWTV.
At Krystal Dawit.
Dawit. And our website is letsfixthisok.org. Sign up for our newsletter, read our blog, and find resources and details about upcoming events. Speaking of which, this Sunday, February 10th, is our first West Wing watch party, 3 p.m. at the Tower Theater. It's free. Come on down. Next Tuesday, February 12th, is an election in many counties, including Oklahoma County, Oklahoma City. You've got 4 wards of city council up for election. Please go vote this Tuesday, February 12th. And our first Capitol Day will be February 21st at the State Capitol. Let's Fix This is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization who strives to educate and equip all Oklahomans to engage with your government in meaningful ways. We make politics cool. Right, Scott? Scott says yes, doesn't have a microphone.
Yes,
Excellent. We encourage you to get involved any way you can. Come to the Capitol Day. And remember, decisions are made by those who show up. Have a great week.